Connection between.
What's the connection between several teachers, really excellent teachers, having problems with molestation?
Well, they're not yet Buddhas. They're high bodhisattvas. Buddhas would never harm anybody. They're incapable of it. Cause pain to anybody. Never. It's impossible because they are the other person. Actually, to really be a spiritual teacher, although you don't necessarily have to be a Buddha, not just a sort of informational teacher like a professor or whatever, but to be really a spiritual teacher, and also that means, a psychoanalyst is true, psychiatrist is really a kind of spiritual teacher, absolutely. That's the responsibility they have. And in the Buddhist psychology world, to really be a responsible one, you have to have a degree of clairvoyance. You have to. You should not do it. Should not take the burden of someone else's karma, so to speak, and tell them what they should do, or give them some, or know which teaching they should use, or whatever, and pretend to do so if you don't actually know their mind by empathy. And that's why you're absolutely right about what Mark talks about, Winnicott, and Freud even, about how you have to be non-judgmental. You have to sort of just let the other person fill the space and sort of empathize with what they're doing, and then something will emerge in that pattern that will be, you'll somehow, then you intervene a little here and see what's in there. In a way, you're simulating clairvoyance, which a real spiritual teacher has. And that's not Buddhahood. You have, actually everybody gets clairvoyance when you die. When you die, you will have instant clairvoyance. Not instant, you might stay passed out and sleeping in the clear light for 3 or 4 days, they say. And then you go back, you go around where your previous body and relationships were, and as a kind of ghost. And they actually give you advice. They say, when your de-brained mind, as a continuum of a human mind, no longer trapped in the wetware, Alzheimer-afflicted brain, or whatever it is, when you die at older age, is instantly 9 times more intelligent than you were in life. And you instantly have those normal psychic powers that are actually normal to the human being, of empathy and clairvoyance, etc. And so therefore you can detect the ambivalence in the mind of all of your previous relatives. So when so-and-so at your funeral, and you're hovering around there and looking down, well, that's me. They put rouge on, have a tuxedo on, or a nice dress, your ballet dress or whatever, and you're in the lipstick, and long, and you're looking, whoa, is that me? Oh, I can't. I try to get in even if you're on. They tell you not to try to get back in, and then you're reading the mind, and Uncle Joe is like, oh, poor Bob, oh, I'm gonna miss him terribly, and then you're reading his mind. Good riddance, that bum, he was always bothering me. I hated the way he did this and that, and then don't freak out. Don't be angry with them. Everybody has ambivalence in their mind. There are levels in their mind of thinking that they're voices that they don't even listen to themselves. They're in denial that they have. There's a love-hate thing in other people's mind. Don't freak out, because you automatically can feel everything that everybody's feeling. They actually give you advice. And then the priest, they say, don't be mad at the priest. The priest is like thinking about the beer and the burger he's going to have. Blah, 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 and really they're thinking about how much am I getting paid for this, I got the burger. And they're completely not there, they're just doing something by which means don't be mad at them. Because you are a being whose emotions will reshape your subtle body, like the dream body in the after-death state. And therefore don't go into any negative thing, don't indulge in, don't be irritated, just be compassionate. Everybody has these multiple minds. They actually say that. It's really fun, actually. And of course it's fun if you've used your life meaningfully, where you're not just totally reactive. If you die as a 100% reactive person, just like, don't cross my line, don't think this, don't say that, and you suddenly are aware of people's negative sides, then you're going to be reactive, then that's going to be harmful to you in that state. Like it'll turn a positive dream into a nightmare. And then that's bad for where you're headed, they say. And, it's like Pascal's wager. Those of you who are going to say, oh, I have trouble with that idea of a future life. You won't have trouble if you get used to it. There are thousands. It's very commonsensical. It has been in the history of human beings. It has been a majority consensus. But it's only a relative thing. It's actually an inconceivable reality, so who knows? Maybe it's wrong. Tell Buddha if it's wrong, there's a better theory. But, Point is, it's much more sensible than being nothing. There's no example in nature of something becoming nothing. That's why they have secular thermodynamics. There's no example in nature. There's no verification of anything ever becoming nothing, because nobody ever finds nothing. And therefore, Pascal's wager in relation to Christianity can be applied here to a scientific claim in a relative science, the relative reality, that your mind continues, which is a total mind-changing thing if you can get used to it. It doesn't even help to believe in it if you leave your gut into stuck in Richard Dawkins' land, you know, because that's where our consensual reality sticks us. But if you think critically about that and get used to it, read all the accounts of people who remember previous lives, the Ian Stevenson work, the child's life before life, there's books by his successor in the University of Virginia, there's all kinds of Buddhist literature about it, there's Hindu literature, there's Taoist literature, secular literature, no dramas and things in Japan, plays and things about people having experience with each other over a succession of lifetimes. It's a huge, you get used to that narrative, and then you suddenly feel, oh wow, what I do will have consequence even beyond my inhabiting this embodiment and this circle of friends and this environment and this country and this thing. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful biological theory. Actually, in the history of Asia, it undid to some degree sexism, because you can be reborn as a male if you're female, you can be reborn as a female if you're male. It undid racism and nationalism, tribalism, you know. Oh, why should that tribe be my ultimate enemy and some non-humans? The pseudo-speciation that cultures indulge in when they make war and you treat other humans like they weren't human, what's called pseudo-speciation by anthropologists, where they make that being into another species. Well, you might be born as that being. So it undoes, subliminally, as a scientific theory, it undoes all of those things. And in Tibet and Mongolia, where it became mainstream of all the Asian societies, most mainstream of all of them, because it didn't have like a tribal thing, a strong ascended tribal thing to deal with. And I guess the high altitude, they were vulnerable to all these siddhas and psychiatrists. They were getting all shrunk, even the kings. In their nomad tents, they were following them around and shrinking them. And they didn't worship ancestors. They don't care about ancestors. You know, why should I be sending? You know, in China they have these constant rituals, and they're sending Grandpa a cookie and a cup of tea. But why should I send Grandpa a cookie? Grandpa's not up waiting for a cookie and a cup of tea. Grandpa's my neighbor, reborn as my neighbor, more very likely. So it diffuses. So this meditation that we're doing, which is a high development of a kind of different level of altruism and compassion in a person who uses it to overcome their own depression and others' depression, this in emanating around a culture undoes those things. And that may well account why, you know, the mystery, Chinese invented gunpowder and cannons and didn't use them in war. Indians had tremendous steel technology. That's why the Iranians and Alexander were trying to conquer India. India had the greatest steel deposits and huge steel technology, Iron Age stuff, you know. And their armies were invincible before Buddha went there, because they were so wealthy. And elephant cavalry, you know, like in the Lord of the Rings, you know, those guys on the elephant with arrows, you know. They were really tough. They beat the crap out of Alexander and the Macedonians. But a few centuries of this biological theory, and they were vulnerable to being conquered by other people. So, you know, and their higher level of being makes you vulnerable. And in history, therefore, we lose track of what they were like in their high period. And then we think we have to defend ourselves, and the Russians will get us, or somebody will get us, you know. And yet then we live in an armored way in our society where what are we defending? People shooting each other in the street 50 times a day, you know, and guns everywhere. Like, what kind of life is that? You know, we're all victims of Wilhelm Reich's emotional plague of defensiveness and violence against others. But what is the family like? You know? Then there's terrible violence in the family when you have such terrible violence facing outside. So those Indian people and Asian people, Chinese, all of them, they weren't perfect. They had still wars, they had problems, but much less, actually, than we. Therefore, the Brits, right? The Brits came and they were looking for spices, better cooking, decent food, etc., and wealth, and they went there and they conquered them. They beat them all up and stole all their money. And you know, the queen, the crown jewel of Queen Elizabeth, those are like Indian and African diamonds on that crown. But what good is it doing them? They're just doing Brexit. What good does it do? Anyway, okay, that's it. So these three things, you know. The first one about how you're so precious, you're going to die. What is the biological theory where your mind is part of the causality of biology? Your mind and your spirit is part of the causality of biology. It's not just genes and pills and food and things and ancestors, but your own mind. Ironically, the materialist thing puts you back into being slave of ancestors, actually, because there's nothing but the bloodline. You know? So it opens up to a new kind of tribalism. It's actually dangerous also, that ideology, actually. Because then everything is like, my blood is what I am. You know, my parents made my brain and my understanding, and my genes, and my, whatever, I won't get into that. So it's actually a new backwardness, actually, this materialist idea. You know? Whereas the biology, where your mind, you are an agent in your own evolution. And it's just a relative theory, but it has backing, there is evidence. And in that case, you have another level of responsibility in your interrelating with others and with the world. And you become a less psychotic, irresponsible person. A sociopath is someone who's irresponsible because they're not taking responsibility for what they do. In extreme case, they're not there when they're doing it, right? Isn't that the thing? Tony Perkins in the shower with the knife, right? He's not there. So he's so withdrawn in his thing. So you are there in your own evolution, and you're responsible as you do. And as I say, one of the great things that would happen in the West, in America, if this became more known in America, and I think it has become more known in my life. There have been movies and things that show it, like that people have seen. And people will become nicer to their exes. The divorce lawyers will get less pay. And people will realize that they fell in love with them in this life, and they had children with them, or they did whatever they did, and then they had a disagreement, and then they couldn't stand it, they wanted another one. But then they won't be too harsh, because they'll realize they'll fall in love in the next life. And the next life, the other one might have the more expensive lawyer. And they'll be nicer. Because you realize that anything you do, any interaction you have with anybody now, could and will be repeated. So if you leave a wound and a scar and harm on another being, and just I'll never see that person again, you can never say that about anybody. You never get away from anybody. So you better be as nice as possible to everyone. Something like that. Which doesn't always mean be namby-pamby to them. Sometimes you should challenge them, criticize them. Sometimes you should go like this. Usually it's my wife who does that. She goes like this. She goes like this. And then I do obey. I really do.
I just bring up one word that I've been thinking about that I haven't heard here.
Okay.
It's the word paradox.
Yes.
It seems, and you mentioned ambivalence, I mean, that's another
Yes.
version of it.
We're moving
That it
that way.
seems to me that especially what we were talking about in meditation,
Sure.
that, I mean, I have always thought, probably from psychotherapy, that maturity was to be able to hold a paradox in your mind.
Absolutely.
And it could also be, you could also say that to be enlightened is to hold a paradox. I mean, that idea of the safe place that is
Absolutely.
empty but full of energy.
Totally right.
And it's very hard for the young to do. You know, it's a tendency among the young to see
Thank you.
things in terms
We
of
are
black
agreed.
and white. And as you get older, I have to say, I feel like I'm in a demographic that is the happiest demographic, which has now been proved, you know, over 50 into my 60s and just turning 70. You know, the happiest I've been in my life, and I was absolutely in hell in my 20s. But, you know, that idea, because now I am comfortable with paradox, and I think that in meditation, that's the idea that you are not with the other. It's different than love with a person, but the idea that you will hold within yourself the love of yourself and the hatred of yourself together, you know. And what was powerful to me, what you mentioned at one point, the phrase reparenting yourself, because I didn't get great parenting.
One thing, only can I make one footnote to what you
That's
said?
what I wanted to say.
And that is, what you are saying is why Buddhist psychologists have the preliminary to enlightenment, to insight, there's a stage which they call tolerance
Yes.
of inconceivability.
Yes.
And the tolerance is preliminary to enlightenment. But normally they don't draw the point, which I like to say, that enlightenment, rather than, people tend to think, including mystics, that enlightenment is a kind of collapse to either a resignation to all there is this relative world, or a collapse to, like, enlightenment is some big, vast, what I call the cheap oneness state, where it's all one, it's all empty, vast space, and I'm not even here, and no one else is, so isn't it great, we're all one, but actually nobody's home here. So that's a cheap oneness. The more difficult oneness is the ultimate tolerance of cognitive dissonance, that we're all not here and we are here.
That's right.
And we very much are here. So the not here-ness is what makes possible the are here-ness, and also makes mutable the are here-ness. So the only thing I would say about what you said is you said hold within your own mind the paradox. The key there is when you strive to hold the paradox in your own mind, your mind has to be transformed. It blows your mind out to being greater than it was. Because the paradox sort of shatters, truly expands it, where self and other dissolves, one and many dissolve, and then you really achieve awareness of you live in what the Vimalakirti Sutra calls the inconceivable liberation. And then you really can help transform, and you really can help transform others, and help them, and your field creates a field where others get beyond what they habitually imagine to be their own mind. So a paradox sort of to hold it, you have to pry open your usual grasping sense that, oh yeah, this fits with what I already knew, sort of thing. I have had students in my life, you probably have had them in your practice, I have had students who I always have to leave 10 minutes at the end of a small class. You can't do it in a big lecture, but in a small class, I have to leave around 10 minutes at the end to give them space to explain to me how they already knew everything I taught them in that hour. Or they feel like worried when they leave, they feel anxious that somehow that they learned something new from someone else. And that's because they had a thing with their fathers, and mothers. And I know there's several who are particularly intense about that. And they can't relate to teachers because they have to already have known everything. And that's why life is so boring when you're stuck in conceptuality. Because you can only experience what you preconceive that you experience. In Buddhist epistemology, you're going to be studying this. Buddhist Dignaga, Dharmakirti, you don't have those sources in good English yet. But it's intense about how when you see white, you don't know it's white. Because even an ordinary person, when they see white, they're just lost in the white. And there's no subject-object for a split fraction of a second. And then they see, quote, white, unquote. And then it's just they impose their concept on it. And then it happens so fast that they think that all of the other epistemologists in ancient India, from the Hindu schools and so on, they were freaked completely that the deepest nature of experience is non-conceptual. And that preceded Kant's insight about the Copernican revolution and the inaccessibility of the essence of any object, which he got. But he didn't think there was an experiential way of reaching that. He said, you never can reach it, his whole thing. Because he didn't have some friend, some Zen master explaining to him like Descartes didn't. But he was inspired by that subliminally out of his own reality. To said they couldn't believe that you could separate concept and experience. Because experience you lost in the thing you experienced. And you can't sit back and it's controllable. Oh yeah, I know that's that. You don't, But then there's another level when you have done that, where then you realize others are doing that, and then you can fit with them and help them and set it up. You can't throw it away. If you think just by suppressing your conceptuality and doing a no-think thing, it will go away. The deeper structures in your extremely subtle, nervous, hologram, which has embedded itself temporarily in your human brain, but which is bigger than your human brain, you're mistaken, because it comes back up. It can temporarily be suppressed, but it has to be unraveled much more carefully than just suppressed temporarily. According to Buddhist epistemologists. I don't know, I'm still a prisoner. I didn't have a good shrink yet. Probably, I have no time.
This is wonderful.
Any question? Where did it end? Oh, okay, so please enjoy your lives and have fun with all other beings. Don't be depressed, don't be anxious, don't be addicted, and you know, or rather be addicted to being unaddicted, paradoxically.